everybody, it's Mr. Sean. It is good to be back on the farm again, and today's video I want to talk about one specific tree and a very interesting activity you can do with it. So right in front of us here we have the tulip poplar. Tulip poplar are a deciduous tree. They grow very quickly, very vertical, and they can kind of take over an area, especially as it is starting out as a forest. So this area here on the woodland trail leading out over by the campfire circle used to be very clear roughly 30-40 years ago, and is now grown in with lots of tulip poplar, white pine, and other trees like cherry trees and sassafras. The leaves of the tulip poplar are very broad and broken into 3 distinct segments with 2 peaks on each. It's similar to a clover in it has 1 section at the very top and 2 sections on either side. The leaf itself kind of has the appearance of a tulip. The tulip poplar's flower also has the appearance of a tulip, and the bark of the tulip poplar is very sweet smelling. It's very fragrant and kind of has a similar scent to a tulip as well. So the name for the tulip poplar is very apt in its description. This tulip poplar here, right next to our campfire circle, is one of the oldest in the area, and you can see that the older bark is broken up into different ridged sections, but as we go up the tree, it might be very hard to see as it is very high up, the bark gets much smoother. We'll see if we can find a younger tree to see this characteristic. And in no time, really, we have found another tulip poplar. This younger one, you can see towards the bottom, has started to break up into the ridges like the older one. But the bark on the youngest part of the tree, as we go up higher, is very smooth. And this activity we want to do today is using the bark of the tulip poplar. We are going to be making our own survival rope. So this is rope you can make just by using the tulip poplar bark. So what we're going to need to do is we are going to need to find a downed limb of tulip poplar where the bark is starting to split off a little bit. If it is damp, if it is lying on the ground and it's very wet from the rain, that is actually the best one we can use because it's going to be a lot easier to manipulate and to split apart. So I'm going to take a quick look around and be back in a second with the bark once we've found our perfect branch. So we could take this limb down and work with it that way. I'm just going to leave it the way it is and show you what we need to do. Because we just want to make a little bit of rope. We don't have to make, 100 feet of rope that's going to be good enough for hauling up a huge log or something like that for a shelter. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take our hands and start to peel the bark little by little because we don't want it to break into small segments. We want one long continuous piece. So we're just going to work our way up and down the branch until we can get our strip all the way off. So now we have our one long continuous piece of the tulip poplar bark. And what we need to do next is to split it into its different segments. You can see tulip poplar is perfect for making rope because it has all these little hairs running through it. The cambium layer of the tulip poplar is in long continuous strands. So if you find bark that's like this, you will likely be able to make rope out of it as well. You could do it with grapevines or the outer bark of the eastern red cedar, and that one takes a whole lot more work because you're going to get it in smaller strips, but it still will make an emergency rope if you absolutely need rope. So we are just going to continue to peel this off, and we can just throw away the parts we don't need. Yeah. And we're left with this great stuff we're going to be using to make the twine that's going to be our rope. If you find that it is too difficult to peel off this layer from the bark you've found, I recommend soaking it overnight, or honestly for even a week or more, and it will be a whole lot easier to strip off and to use. So now that we have a single long strand of our cambium layer of tulip poplar bark, we're going to start to twist this into the twine that we will then braid into rope. So to do this, we are going to take our tulip poplar bark, we are going to put it between our thumb and forefinger of one hand, and with the thumb and forefinger of the other, we're going to start to twist it. And as you twist, let the bark pull through your other hand. Now, it may come unraveled as you are doing this, and that is okay. What we're mostly looking to do is to break the cambium layer up into an even smaller strand, but keeping all those smaller strands together through this twisting motion. And that will give the twine more strength, because it will have all of those strands, those very fine strings, all pulling against one another. So the friction between each of those strands will be what gives it its strength. And that's what's going to happen when we go to braid our twine as well. When we get to that part, we're going to make sure that we have a nice tight braid, because it leaves less room for the strings to wiggle around and increases the amount of surface area they are touching on, which helps increase the amount of friction between them. So we're almost done twisting our twine. All right, and there we go. We have one strand of twine so far. I'm now going to do this with two more, and we'll start braiding our rope. Yeah, it's fine. It's long enough. All right. So we now have 3 strands of twine from our tulip poplar bark, and we are going to now take each of those strands and put their ends together as best we can. And we're just going to do a simple figure 8 knot into this. So we're going to take all 3 of them together, make a loop with the 3 ends on the bottom, and put those 3 ends into the loop we just made and pull. I'm just going to do it very carefully to give us as much room as possible. And now we have all 3 of those strands connected together. And so we can use this as our starting point for braiding our rope. So to give us a little bit of a hand braiding our rope, if you don't have a partner to work with, somebody else that can hold on to the 3 strands as you start to braid, what you could do is get an alligator clip and clip it onto a surface. Or if you don't have an alligator clip because you're in the middle of the woods, you can find a crook in a tree or a random bench somewhere. And we are just going to wedge it in there with a stick, and now it won't move as we braid. So I'm just going to actually bring it up a little more towards the surface. That way we can braid as much of our rope together as possible. And then we're going to braid this the same way you would braid hair. So if you have long hair and have ever learned how to braid, this is what you're going to do to make your rope. And if you don't, make sure you have 4 sisters who force you to. And that's what worked for me. So to braid our rope, just like you would braid hair, we have it separated into our 3 sections. Our left-hand side, our right-hand side, and our middle. And we are going to then take we'll start with our left-hand side and fold it over into the center and make the center our left-hand side. Then we'll take our right-hand side and fold it into the center and make our center our right-hand side. And we are just going to continue this process over and over and over again until our twine is at its very end. As you are braiding, make sure you pull your sides towards the top to help keep a tight braid. And it'll be a lot easier to see once I'm finished and we can get a close-up look. But we're just going to keep doing this until it's done, just as you would do anything. You do it until it's done, because otherwise you didn't do it. So we have a decent sized piece of rope, piece of string here. I could keep going, but the clouds are getting darker and I feel a couple of raindrops, so I kind of want to get out of here. So at the very end of our braid, what I'm going to do is twist it around like we did before. Pull our 3 strands through that end, just as we did in the beginning. Only now it's a lot easier, I say as I struggle. And then we're going to pull it. And I want to leave some of the braid at the top because it's going to make a nice tight knot on there. And then we can just clip the ends, pull out our last bit. Oop. Well, be careful when you take it out of the wedge because mine just split. But I'm just going to do the same thing I did a moment ago. Make that same knot again. And boom, we have ourselves a nice piece of string, piece of rope. And if we wanted to make this bigger or stronger, all we would need to do is make multiples of these smaller ones and braid them together, just as we did the smaller ones with these strands. But what we have here will work. So here we have, very simply tied up, a ridgepole for a shelter. It's on a cherry tree, and the ridgepole itself is a hunk of tulip poplar. The string is holding up very well. If we wanted it to be even stronger, we would wrap it more times around the tree, but to do that we would need a longer piece of string, and to do that we would need more than 45 minutes I've spent so far. We need roughly 2 hours. But it works, it's super easy, and if you don't want to use it for building a shelter out in the woods, it also makes a very stylish bracelet. So if you have tulip poplars in your area, go out after a storm, find a branch.